Good afternoon. This is Garba Diallo. I am here to talk to you about my reflection and my perspectives on the issue of refugees in the context of the global order that we live in, and of course also in the context of the coronavirus crisis that the world is experiencing now since the beginning of this year. And of course, there has been so many surprises. No one expected that we will be grounded, all the whole world will be grounded. No many flights, not traveling, and some people are not even allowed to go out of their houses. So in a way, it's a little bit equalizing, and of course, maybe reminding us the situation that many people, millions of people, have been living in for sometimes for generations, like refugee camps in Kenya or in Afghanistan or in Iran. People have been living in these places for generations. Some people are born, growing up, and dying in these refugee camps. So maybe it's healthy that we experience some of the challenges that refugees have been experiencing. So I want to put my talk in the context of the world order, and especially the background, the triggers or direct causes and effect of the refugee crisis, the effect on human or the human effect, and also the environmental effect. But let's maybe have a short introduction about the corona issue. I mean, now, of course, the whole world has been grounded, and we know that the virus does not distinguish between prime ministers, princes, celebrities, and refugees. It attacks everyone that it can get hold of. That is where the equality ends. Of course, if you are a rich person, or if you have power and money, and also you are known, of course, you have the chance to go to the best hospitals, you can get the best treatment, and then if you are lucky to survive, you have a place to go to. You have a place to go and recuperate in nice, comfortable houses. You have food, you have all the things you need to recuperate, to regenerate your mind and also your body. But and then, of course, the other limitations that the corona has placed on all human beings, like staying at home, social distance, washing hands, and so on and so forth. Again, that is experienced differently by different people. I mean, if you are a refugee, you have no home, and you have no access to water, you have no access to health service, you cannot afford the social distance, you cannot afford staying at home, because if you have no home, you cannot really stay at home. And if you are in a refugee or migrant concentration camp, being tortured and beaten up and put there in thousands and thousands of people in crampy holding places like in Libya, you cannot even think about that kind of luxury, staying at home, washing hands, and keeping social distances. So that's why it's the corona virus, even though equalizes the way it attacked people and the way the access to people, but it does not equalize the effect of the pandemic. Does not hit people the same way, and especially both in the immediate term, medium term, and long term. So refugees are really at the bottom of these choices. Now let's take, for example, we have Yemen. People have been bombed for the last 5 years, non-stop, carpet bombed by powerful countries with the support of superpowers, world powers. Where Yemen, as you know, is a country that is the poorest of the poor of the Middle East. It's been bombed by the richest and the most uh, weaponized Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, with the support of, their allies, US, UK, and the other countries. So here now there are 12 million people who are dependent on UN food rations or food supplies, aid to survive. Now the UN World Food Program said they have to reduce this food to half. So that means that these people have to eat half or even nothing. And then, of course, the incidents of the virus have been also occurring in Yemen. So just this double tragedy, nobody knows what's going to happen. Same in Libya. Libya, you have, at a time, the last 5 years, at every time there are about 800,000 mostly African migrants in concentration camps that are being financed and maintained, financed by powerful countries, and also maintained by smugglers and illegal armed groups in Libya. If you look at, for example, also in Lesbos, in Greece, there is a small island, this very tiny island. They said that there is room for about 3,000 people, but now this island for the last 5 years is been holding over 20,000 people. And these people are put there and they are not allowed to go. It's a lot of violence, especially against women. Some women, refugees, have to even put diapers so that at night, because they don't dare to go out of their, sleeping places for fear of being raped and then also brutalized by many different means. So here it's important to remember that all these people have no choice. What we call now social distance, stay at home, wash your hands, use sanitizer, all this, they have no choice to that, to do that. Therefore, it's very, very important that any measure to deal with, try to mitigate, and hopefully stop, or eradicate the coronavirus should also be given, focus on the people who are the most vulnerable. Because if we don't get rid of this virus, it would bounce back on us, as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia said, that it's a common threat, it's a common challenge, which needs or call for common approach, a common coordinated approach by the countries. And hopefully we can learn from that as a starting point for global collaboration. So back to the issue of refugees, what's called war or hunger refugees or ecological refugees and so on. First of all, who are the refugees? I think it's important to demystify some few concepts. First of all, to say refugee crisis, I think the crises are mostly political crises that caused the refugees to flee their homes, because refugees are not tourists. They are not leaving their homes because they want to go and have fun somewhere and come back. They run away, and normally they don't take anything except what's on their bodies. Sometimes people will leave their families or their kids and so on. So refugees are not tourists, and the refugees are the responsibility of the countries and the whole world that has created the conditions that pushed refugees out of their homes and their familiar environment. So refugees, legally, is the term. It means people who flee their countries and who seek refuge and security in other places. So how many refugees are there? Now, according to the UN and international agencies, there are about 70 million refugees around the world. And most of them come from countries that have been ravaged by war that was created especially by other countries, like as we know about Afghanistan, as we know about Iraq, as we know about Libya, and then other places, and of course Syria. So refugees are people who are victim of conflict or other human tragedies like hunger. Of course, if you are a farmer, your farm has been destroyed because of environmental violence. And also, if you are a fisherman or a fisherwoman, that your fishing area has been vacuum cleaned by big foreign trawlers who come and fish and destroy your area, like we've seen in Somalia, which created also one of the reasons why we have the Somali Coast Guard, or the so-called Somali pirates. Then we have to go back to the roots, because we should not run after the smoke. We have to go to the roots and root out the roots in order to stop the effect, because these are consequences, symptoms of underlying structures which are part of the world order that we experience now. Since globalization kind of accelerated from the early 90s onward. So refugees have no choice. No one actually, I think, in the world would leave their homes and go to unknown, strange places. So it's a kind of, we have to go to the cause in order to eradicate the consequences or the effect. And then at the end, it affects everybody, but especially the victims. And then if you think about, also there are some issues. Of course, people are also run away from their countries because of their beliefs, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. Because the power to be does not accept, or some groups do not accept them to be the way they are. So, as I said, 70 million refugees, displaced people. Who's sending these people? Who are the producing countries? As I said, countries that have been victims of foreign invasion and foreign destruction. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Eritrea, and so on and so forth. So either most of the time foreign, but also there are some internal factors like what we have in Eritrea and so on. So it's a combination of these foreign or external and internal factors that push the refugees to this desperate migration. And the other is the poverty. And of course, if you are, you cannot just, human being will always seek better life if they cannot get it where they are. So that's why some people travel. They pay, maybe they borrow money or collect whatever they have and pay smugglers, and then end up dying on the desert or across the Mediterranean. Just the last few years, more than 10,000 people have died trying to reach Europe. But this is just a drop in the sea, because at the end of the day, more than 80% of the refugees, displaced people, they stay inside their countries, or they are called IDPs, internally displaced people, or in the neighboring countries like Turkey, where you have more than 3 million Syrian refugees, Sudan, Sudanese going to, for example, Uganda, or people, in Jordan, in Lebanon. All these countries are overwhelmed with refugees. So out of these 60, 70 million people, about 1 million reach Europe. But then we panic and we forget our responsibility, which is actually also the whole issue of democracy. Means that if we do something and if we have a responsibility for this. Therefore, I think the rich, powerful countries that have been part of the problem should be part of the solution. And then not to repeat the same mistakes that have happened the last 20 or so years, from Somalia to Afghanistan, Libya, and so on and so forth. So very few people reach, but we make a lot of noise concerning that. And then sometimes, of course, we say there is no money, but suddenly now with the corona, there is a lot of money. A lot of money. Countries have a lot. Suddenly they can dig up a lot of money, both collectively like the EU or individually like, the individual countries saying that we are covering, the cost of, salaries and whatever in the next 3 months in response to the corona. So you have to think about really also back to reflect on the fact that migration is part of human life and part of life. People have always migrated. So building walls, paying armed groups in Libya to keep refugees or migrants away does not help, because people have migrated all the time and will always migrate, no matter how many walls we build. From 30 million years ago, when people left the Rift Valley in Africa, they always have been moving. And the fact that we have people, the Europeans in America, in North and South America, and Australia, New Zealand, and all over the world, people have to move. People will move. That's a part of life and part of development. Without actually migration, there is no development. So now, before I stop, I have some challenges for you here. Let me just find this paper. So, in your opinion, what are the main conditions that force people to flee their homes, their familiar environment, to foreign places through life-threatening journeys, routes, whether it's across the desert, whether it's across the sea, and so on. So just think about that. So what are the causes? What pushes these people? Please think about that. And how can we eliminate these conditions? So let your imagination fly, and let's write down. Okay, what can we do? How do we eliminate the causes and the conditions that are behind these desperations? People are desperate, who jump into a small, flimsy rubber boat that is supposed to carry about 60 people, and they end up sitting there crammed with 300 to 400 other people, and going into the sea. So who is ultimately responsible for this? It's the refugees. And remember, as I said, they are not tourists. Refugees are not tourists. So they don't just say, okay, the weather is very bad here, and then let's go to Spain, or let's go to sunny places. Let's go to Hawaii. Let's go to Bali, or let's go to Thailand. No. So normally they have to run away for their lives, and maybe bring nothing. Leave their houses, their furniture, their cars, their whatever they had. And sometimes even leave their kids. So who is ultimately responsible? Think about both individuals, think about institutions, think about private businesses, think about the world. Who's responsible? So what kind of solution do you envisage, you can imagine, you think can help end these tragedies that are not necessary? Because as Gandhi said, there is enough for every human need, but there is not enough for human greed. So what can we do? So what can individuals do? What can civil society organizations do? What can government do? And what can the UN do? Then, of course, there has been a lot of discussion about sharing the burden of hosting the refugees, especially in Europe. I mean, some countries say, no, we don't, we have no responsibility, we don't want refugees because they bring all these kind of things. They cause kind of problems, they have different colors, different religion, different cultural background. So in your opinion, how can the world share the burden of the refugees who are already out of their countries? You know. Then, of course, those refugees already who are away, who are here, who are in the host countries, how do you think that these countries should host and integrate those refugees? Especially think about in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of training, in terms of job services, providing them with job. How do you think that can be? Please think about it and come with some suggestions. Finally, how can we deal with some of the deeper traumas that the refugees come with? Because it's not only enough to give them jobs or education or money or houses, but many of them have experienced very, very, very traumatic situations, seeing their loved ones killed or tortured, or they themselves being tortured and escaped. And, so how can we really support them in order to deal and hopefully heal the traumas that they have come with? And of course, if you have any other ideas, this is your chance to write down or comment on what should be done. Finally, now I started by talking about the corona effect, the corona issue, and that what we learn from the trauma is that actually just the fact that we've been grounded, we have enough time to think, to reflect, and to see that we are all human beings and we are united in our vulnerability to these kind of viruses. So how can we use the time really to imagine another world where people don't have to run away from their homes? How can we do that? How can we imagine a world beyond the corona crisis, especially in terms of human rights, human dignity, and the respect for life and respect for for everyone's right to life, to livelihood, and then to freedom that we are all aspiring to, which makes us human. So how can we learn, and what can we learn, and how can we, what we take out of or take away from the corona experience to solve or mitigate the political crisis of the refugees. I call it political crisis because the refugee crisis are a result of political crisis. So follow up on our different courses, and of course you can write to me, and then I have a presentation of this of my talk, I will share it, and then you can you can you can download it. You can use this presentation, and you can ask me some questions. But I would like you to especially these challenges, to reply to. You know, I have 7 plus 1, where you are free to add, which is bonus. So look at these questions, because they will be uploaded, and then use them so that we get a little bit wiser. So I wish you all the best. Stay well, stay safe, and let's use the time to create a world without people having to run away from their homes and from their countries. Thank you very much.